There is a saint trinity of things that Ukraine is awaiting the most. Weaponry to win the war, investments to recover after, and an international trial for perpetrators of the war crimes. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on our weekly wrap-up on UATV's state channel, bringing the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. The first and foremost expected thing in Ukraine is weaponry, of course. That is what 11th Ramstein is all about. Ramstein Forward Summit unites more than 50 countries worldwide and was launched with the aim of collective support for Ukraine in order to satisfy the defense needs of the Ukrainian army in conditions of resisting the full-scale Russian invasion.
Now, I'm grateful to my good friend, Alexei Reznikov, for joining us at Ramstein. And he once again gave us all a first-hand account of the battlefield dynamics, highlighting Ukraine's most urgent needs in the critical months ahead. We also heard from my colleagues in U.S. European Command about the progress on building Ukraine's combat power as Ukraine prepares to push back the lines of Russian invaders.
The Netherlands and Denmark announced the delivery of 14 German-made Leopard tanks, in addition to the previously announced 100 Leopard 1 version. It is a serious firepower, even so if it can be delivered only at the beginning of 2024. Also, United States announced the $325 million United States dollars worth aid package, which includes ammunition for HIMARS artillery systems and artillery shells. According to the Pentagon, participants of the summit will also coordinate further deliveries of means necessary to protect against the ongoing aggression of the Russian Federation.
During the Ramstein, we discussing the main needs, main priorities. If we have chance to communicate on bilateral platform, we can do it with our partners directly. And certainly, we repeated our demands of the fighter jets as a part of air defense systems. And I'm sure that we will have modern NATO standard G++, 4th generation plus fighter jet as a part of air defense systems. But right now, the main needs, we are talking about the land-air interceptors or ground-landed air defense systems. And certainly we discussed fighter jets as a next stage, because we need to spend time for training courses for the pilots, for the engineers, mechanics, and et cetera, and it will take time. And I'm sure that it's a last point of my Santa wish list, and I think it will be done.
You know, sometimes it seems to me very much that whatever Putin's initial plans for this outrageous, criminal, unprovoked, genocidal and suicidal, just by the way, war, where he achieved them all with the maximum possible opposite effect. That is, Ukraine will be in NATO. Ukraine will be in the European Union. Ukraine is already receiving all of that weaponry and will have more. What's next, Comrade Putin? Shouldn't you be more careful with your wishes, because when they come true, they somehow always add up in favor of Ukraine's glory?
421 days ago, Putin thought he could overthrow the Ukrainian government, thought he could fracture NATO as he launched an unprovoked war of aggression with hundreds of thousands of Russian forces crossing the border on multiple avenues of approach. He was wrong. Ukraine's spirit remains unbroken. There are now 31 members of NATO, and NATO is even stronger and united in the face of Russia's aggression and its attack on the rules-based order. The United States and the members of this contact group remain committed to supporting Ukraine as it fights for freedom against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. To date, the United States has committed more than $35 billion in military assistance, including over 2 million tank and artillery rounds, tens of thousands of anti-armor weapon systems, air defense systems, and other forms of munitions, hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles, precision aerial munitions, and counter-UAS capabilities.
It was exactly 1 year ago when the first meeting of defense ministers of allied countries took place. As we have mentioned before, it is important that today's meeting will be held face-to-face, which means that in addition to official negotiations, there will be also backroom conversations. Who could ever deny that most interesting, important and heated discussions usually take place in the back rooms and during those coffee breaks in between official sessions and statements? Maybe the results of this discussion could cheer our Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba up, because he seems to be a bit frustrated, slamming the EU on Thursday for failing to implement its own decision to jointly purchase ammunition for Ukraine as the bloc's member spat over how to enact the plans.
The inability of the EU to implement its own decision on the joint procurement of ammunition for Ukraine is frustrating. This is a test of whether the EU has strategic autonomy in making new crucial security decisions. For Ukraine, the cost of inaction is measured in human lives. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on Twitter.
As Politica puts it, Kuleba treats this as a test of the EU's ability to make crucial new security decisions and whether the bloc truly has strategic autonomy, echoing the favorite term used by French President Emmanuel Macron when he recently stirred up controversy by saying Europe must not become America's followers. The main point of the contention is the ammunition purchase talks revolves around money. Yes, how much to restrict the money to EU manufacturers and whether to include companies in place like the US and UK. You see, the hard thing in easy terms is that Europe remains what it always was, a hard brick house, as per Bernard Shaw. Wealthy, educated, abundant, safe and sometimes absolutely complacent place, turning a blind eye onto a direct threat. It was exactly the same case during World War I and World War II and as it is now. While some senior European officials are deciding whether it is European or American pie to share, we in Ukraine are fighting the actual war. And, thank God of war, NATO sees that and acts accordingly.
Reinforcing NATO's eastern flank is paramount right now. And the United States has done a lot to do that. We already had permanently based forces here in Europe. But since the war in Ukraine, we've also brought to bear a lot of rotational forces that have come in. And having that permanent and also rotational set of forces has allowed us to do a number of things. One, it's allowed us to integrate further with the NATO alliance, hone our interoperability in various exercises. It's also allowed us to train the Ukrainians. A lot of the trainers that are currently in Europe right now, training the Ukrainians, come from those permanently and rotationally based U.S. troops. And were it not for their presence here, we would have been able to train and prepare the Ukrainians for the upcoming offensive as quickly as we have.
It is our resilience, our strength and ingenuity, our high morale, and it is really easy to understand the source of all of it. It comes from our land, our homes, our families, our future. We want to live in our own way, not Russian way. And as so, we simply have no other choice but to fight. Fight for it. Fight for our very lives.
We've come to learn that the Ukrainians are an indomitable force. They are brave, they fight with will, they fight with vast capability that again and again they have proved the world that they are capable of a great deal. And we expect to see the same in the upcoming counteroffensive. You know, this is to help drive the Russians out of Ukraine. Remember, now the Russians invaded Ukraine. This is the Ukrainians fighting for their home country. This is a Russian occupying land that is not theirs. And so we look forward to seeing what the Ukrainians are going to do in the coming months.
Now, what's to that counteroffensive? I'll leak you the secret intel, okay. It is already happening, folks, you see, since the first day of this war. Even when we were disoriented, when Russian troops came that close to Kyiv. All about this war is one giant global counteroffensive of the whole civilized world against everything outdated, aggressive, ruthless and barbaric, which is Russia. This is why the world will win, simply because future always wins over the past, and what was ruined will be rebuilt. Every dollar, every volunteer of the world spends in favor of Ukraine is not in vain. It is not lost, and it is not forgotten, and it is not a sacrifice. It is an investment. the second sacrosanct thing of the same trinity of this war we are waiting in Ukraine for most, the investment that will be spent on recovery. To make sure this is happening, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg took part in the International Summit of Cities and Regions, which took place in April 1920 in Kiev and the initiative of the head of the state. The event aims to expand the horizons of cooperation of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities under the President with representatives of the local communities around the world and involve them in supporting Ukraine. In total, more than 230 foreign delegates from 40 countries took part in the International Summit of Cities and Regions live and online. What does it mean translated to easy terms? Let's ask someone who should know things as per his direct duty.
With this summit, we are opening a new level of interaction on the Congress side. This is interaction between our communities, the communities of Ukraine and the communities of other respectable states, the states of our partners, which we highly appreciate. Those who, like all Ukrainians, value the most important thing, value freedom and important, effective local self-government.
Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal noted that almost 60 countries around the world helped the settlements of Ukraine in rebuilding the infrastructure damaged by Russian attacks. According to him, more than 300 territorial communities have concluded 1,500 partnership agreements with municipalities all over the country. Jens Stoltenberg emphasized that Ukraine has powerful friends, including NATO. When you need something, we will be there, he assured. Well, beautiful words. And yes, we do need something, sir. We're not just wanting it, no, we demand it. Because my fellow colleagues, journalists from the UATV team, left for war to never come back. The thing is, Ukraine has already paid NATO entrance fee all right, and not only with $300 billion of destruction caused by the new Russian version of fascism, Russism, but also with our blood, our lives, our destinies, the destroyed country, the restoration of which the world is discussing today during the Kiev summit.
At NATO, we're also focused on Ukraine's post-war needs. Most important of all, you need to know that Russia will not wage war against you again. Building on our existing support, NATO is now working on a multi-year support initiative for Ukraine. It will help you to transition from Soviet-era equipment and doctrine to NATO equipment and doctrine. It will ensure full interoperability with the NATO alliance. And it will move Ukraine closer to its rightful place in the Euro-Atlantic family. Ukraine's future is in NATO.
Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal noted that almost 60 countries around the world helped the settlements of Ukraine in rebuilding the infrastructure damaged by Russian attacks. According to him, more than 300 territorial communities have concluded 1,500 partnership agreements with municipalities of other countries. Jens Stoltenberg emphasized that Ukraine has powerful friends, including NATO. When you need something, we will be there, he assured. Beautiful words indeed, and yes, we do need something, sir. We're not just wanting it, no. We demand it. Because my fellow colleagues, journalists from the UATV team, left for war to never come back. The thing is, Ukraine has already paid NATO entrance fee all right, not only with $300 billion of destruction caused by the new Russian version of fascism, Russism, but also with our blood, with our lives, our destinies, the destroyed country, the restoration of which the world is discussing during the Kiev summit. Well, let us all hope that Ukraine will survive until that one fine day when NATO accepts us and the EU fulfills its own obligations. And if you ever ask yourself a question why we need to be in NATO, here it is the one perfect reason.
Росія, зробивши роботу над помилками,
So that Russia, having completed its work on mistakes, does not try to resort to new acts of aggression. Ukraine must become a strong outpost of Europe, an exemplary personification of strength and modernity, a sponsor of regional and pan-European security. It must turn into a real security hub.
The war is costly in all senses. The world is helping, but how is the cash flow distributed in Ukraine anyway? The Office of the President will ensure the coordination of international aid directly at the levels of the regions, which corresponds to the principle of the decentralization, said Alexei Kuleba. More in the matter, not only the Office of the President of Ukraine is watching for the proper use of the money coming in. The United States intelligence also does. According to the Pentagon leaks, official information, they have no intel on misuse of funds allocated by the United States for military support to Ukraine. Yet. But I very much believe it will stay the case. Do you know why I do believe? Call me naive, but because the people of Ukraine exist. The nation, we, the people of Ukraine. Because it was the Ukrainian people who led the government at the beginning of the war, not otherwise. And it is the people who will lead the state to victory. One thing is required from the government, to remember that it serves the people, not vice versa as in Russia. The institution of the statehood, as such, is undergoing revolutionary changes in Ukraine these days, turning from the Russian-Soviet paradigm where every citizen a priori owes the state to a normal society where the state is an instrument, a tool for ensuring the welfare of a citizen, nothing more. Government of the country should be rather a cash cow than a sacred one. The state should not carry any holiness in itself. Human rights, life and health of a citizen, this is what's sacred. And patriotism in peacetime means only two simple things: not committing crime and paying the taxes. In wartime, of course, it is a duty of a citizen to defend the country. And the people of Ukraine fulfill their obligations in full and beyond. And the government, experiencing a global internal reorganization, is forced to comply with the will of the Ukrainian people. Now this is democracy. Yes, Winston Churchill was right when saying that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. However, if you were ever looking for the worst, best democracy example in action during the wartime, turn your attention to Ukraine. We often say that children are our future, but what have we done to secure it? We talk a lot, but we don't do much, do we? It always was and is now the shameful, unfortunate case for us as a human king. Our children are the most vulnerable and unprotected part of our society. Today, Ukrainian children pay the unimaginable price of this war, are subjected to Russian genocide, abduction and murderings. A Ukraine Parliament's member, chairman of the PASI Committee for Culture, Science, Education and Media, Yevgenia Kravchuk, is on our studio today to answer our questions. Good afternoon, Yevgenia.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, yeah, thanks for finding time and joining us. A couple of questions. And the first question. According to the Office of the Prosecutor General, 470 children died and 948 were injured at different levels of severity. The Russian army speaks openly about the killings of children. I mean, I shot 5-year-old girl in the head, brags the PMC Wagner mercenary, admitting that openly. How many more crimes will be revealed when Ukraine liberates the temporary occupied territories is impossible to tell now. I'm not asking this question, of course. However, what do you think can be done now so that the world won't be able to close its eyes to these horrific events later on?
Well, it's really difficult to close eyes with all this information available and all these pictures and videos. Just remember the pictures of Easter night when two young adults, 17 and 18 years old, teenagers basically, were killed by shellings in Zaporizhia region. And in the south, and also in Slavyansk, just a 2-year-old child was killed by the shelling of the residential apartment building. So it's very sad, but this number of killed and injured children by the aggression of Russian Federation to Ukraine rises, the numbers rises every day. And it's probably the most horrific statistics of this war of aggression. We see that the topic of abduction of children, of violence against children, killings and injuring them, actually they are in the focus of international organization, but not all international organizations do something. For example, we don't see anything from the Red Cross, trying to bring back abducted Ukrainian children that were taken from temporary occupied territories to the territory of Russia. We are thankful that ICC, the International Criminal Court, issued a warrant arrest for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova for abduction of Ukrainian children. It's understandable that children's rights are by all the conventions, by Geneva Conventions, are the highest priority.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agree with that, but I think you will also agree that the world can't forget just about anything. Just take a look at this war, what is happening now. The world can easily forget the World War I, the World War II, and it's about to start the World War III. So if, nevertheless, this topic is hushed up, and it's possible, because no one knows really how to treat it, even what to do with this inhumane horror, and how to treat it if, God forbid, the international community turns a blind eye to this, then what do we do as a country?
We have the only way. We cannot stop talking about it, and we have to ensure that our army wins, because the relief for children, adults, for men and women on the temporary occupied territories can come only with the liberation of these lands and with our Ukrainian army coming and kicking out Russian occupiers from these territories. And of course, turn a blind eye. It's very, I would say, unhealthy reaction to such inhuman things that Russian soldiers and especially Wagner Group are doing on Ukrainian territories. And of course, we as parliamentarians are speaking with our colleagues in other national parliaments, in international organizations, and this topic will be in the scope. Polish Senate just passed a resolution about the abduction of Ukrainian children. French Senate did it a few weeks ago. We're going to have the debates in European Parliament this Wednesday and possible resolution coming afterwards. We'll have the debates and resolutions in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. It will happen during the April part session next week with the participation of the First Lady online, addressing the delegates from all 46 member states of Council of Europe.
Right, thank you very much for your great efforts. Another question. Do you personally, as a professional and as a person, think that juvenile tribunal is a separate entity within the special tribunal judiciary body is needed? Do you see this as a viable strategy?
Well, first of all, I'd like to explain what is for the special tribunal, because the special tribunal is only for one crime. It's crime of aggression. It's the mother crime of all other crimes. Now the Prosecutor General has counted more than 70,000 of them, but all of them became possible because military and political leadership of Russian Federation decided to invade another independent state. And for this, tribunal is needed because ICC cannot deal with crime of aggression. It's not in its jurisdiction. So juvenile tribunal cannot be part of it because it's for Putin and for generals and the highest level of political leadership. But as I mentioned, ICC is dealing with these crimes and quite effectively because of this warrant arrest that we saw that was issued in The Hague in March 17th. Now it's very important to ensure that all of the countries that signed signed the Rome Statute. It's 134. They publicly speak up and say that, yes, we will arrest Putin or Lvova Belova if they come to our territory. It's very important because we need to make sure that there will be a punishment for the crimes. It cannot go unpunished. So I'm pretty sure that ICC will do a good job continuing with all of the crimes, especially against kids.
Right, yeah, I agree with you. The inevitability of the punishment is more important than the punishment itself. So it must not be maybe that severe, but the symbolic action should be taken. And symbolic action, of course, is to call things, well, yeah, that Putin is the international criminal and thug and the murderer of children. And amongst the crimes of Russia, the abduction of children, deportation, selection for false medical reasons under the guise of being sent to a camp, you name it, all signs of genocide. Why, in your professional opinion, so carefully and so, just by the way, unsuccessfully and ridiculously, Russia is trying to hide all the details? I'll clear out the fog. What if, anyhow, in some incredible way, Russia, say, managed to hide this crime from the world community? What is its purpose, anyway? Why do they need our children, for God's sake?
Well, it's clearly that they cannot hide all of the signs because a lot of these kids are old enough to speak out, and we already have the testimonies of boy from Mariupol coming from deportation, basically, and he speaks out what happened to him, and they also are stupid enough to film themselves and actually they give the evidence to all of the, the criminal court and all the prosecutors because they are proud of what they do. So they say that these are kids from Mariupol. We brought them to Moscow, and they also I saw the video of some representatives of the educational bodies saying, "Oh, these for kids from Ukraine, they still remember Ukrainian, but it's not a problem. We will reteach them." And they will forget their own language because they need to speak Russian. It's another part of the crime. It's trying to erase the national identity, trying to forbid to speak Ukrainian, to learn to study in Ukrainian language. And actually, I'm working in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe on the resolution on the targeting of cultural identity during conflicts, during wars. And huge part of it will be, of course, dedicated to the case of war of aggression of Russia to Ukraine. And also we are collecting some evidence from teachers that lived for some time on the temporary occupied territories, how they were treated, especially teachers that taught Ukrainian language, Ukrainian literature, and Ukrainian history.
It's great to hear that we will have the evidential base, the irrefutable evidential base, and maybe some international social actions are also needed. But Russian genocide against children in the international arena, reaction, punishment, consequences, is the matter voiced enough already and properly? Do we do enough? What is Ukraine doing is almost clear. You already answered that question. And tell us, please, more. Who supports us in this matter?
Well, if I would stop a bit on the special tribunal for crime of aggression and for tribunal for political military leadership. Already we have 34 countries on board in the core group. They meet every 1.5 or 2 months, and with every month there are more and more countries on board. And now it's not the question about should it be established. It's just the question in what form. We have a few, I would say 3 variants on the table from the treaty signed by the countries to the possibility to organize it by the General Assembly of United Nations to pass the resolution and then address the United Nations General Secretary to establish such tribunal, or to have the hybrid one together Ukrainian prosecutors and judges and foreign prosecutors and judges. So we're looking on the best way and the best possible solution to have more countries on board. And of course, as I said, the huge role is for parliamentarians because they speak up, they have debates, they have resolutions, they tell their people in their countries that these crimes cannot go unpunished, and that's why all the civilized world has to support Ukraine in its fight for independence and for liberation of the territories. Because once we go to occupied territories, deoccupy them, we can bring humanitarian aid, we can bring justice to these territories, and we can make our children smile again.
I'm absolutely sure, Evgenia, that all of the Ukraine, and me just as well, agree with you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much for finding time for us and for your efforts. And
Thank you
for
for
your
inviting. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. And now, time for MORE, Minute of Righteous Evil. As promised, dear users of Life and YouTube, I picked up the questions that got my attention. The first question belongs to the user Matt Leach Music. Matt Leach Music is asking the question many are asking themselves these days: why is Hungary balking, opposing all of the EU decisions and looking really, really pro-Russian whatsoever? Well, ain't that obvious? Hungary balking because it is in Balkans in the first place, in the second place. And a bit more serious, Hungary is still the Soviet Union, you see. Comrade Orban dreams of shaking hands with Comrade Putin, and then together they go to shake hands with Comrade Lenin. Then I don't know what then. Maybe the two guys are planning to produce the ugliest Russian Soviet-Hungarian cars in the world. You know, those made to cause your intervertebral discs to fall out after half years of driving. You see, Hungary is a very, very practical country. At least that's what Orban wants it to look like, which is quite a task when you're keen to buy cheap Russian oil at the cost of Ukrainian blood. 16,000 kidnapped and almost 500 killed children. Thing is, dear Matt, that the country is called the Kingdom of Hungary. But all that today is left of kingdom in it is a couple of Orbans, a position of conciliation with Putin, and a major economic clusterfuck if they continue to Orbanate. In easy terms, money. A lot of money. Hell of a lot of money. As much money as crazy Russian tyrant is ready to pay for the services of conciliation with at least somewhat European-looking country, while his own country is abandoned by the rest of the civilized world. So here comes the hard truth in easy terms. Hungary is balking because it is not civilized enough yet. No worries. The world has Ukraine.